Okay, it's 10 o'clock. I'd like to call this meeting to order. The proceedings of this meeting will be recorded and made available on the internet. I'd like to move on to item 1.2 of our agenda, which is roll call, and ask our Deputy Clerk, Bianca Dergisevic, to please call the roll.
Thank you. Mayor Lamshead, are you present?
I am present.
Deputy Mayor Armstrong?
Present.
Councillor Franzen?
Present.
Councillor Braybrook?
Present.
Councillor Cadigan?
Present.
And for staff, we have Michelle Wilson, CAO. Jesse Clark, Director of Corporate Services Clerk. Eric Gay, Director of Building and Planning and CBO.
Present.
Adele Arbor, Planner.
Present.
Derek Bertram, Planning Technician.
Present.
And Bianca Dragicevic, Deputy Clerk, is present.
Okay, thank you very much, Bianca. We can move on now to item 1.3 of our agenda, which is land acknowledgement and moment of reflection. We respectfully acknowledge that Trent Lakes and Peterborough County are located in the Treaty 20 Mississauga territory, in the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaty First Nation, which include Curve Lake, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog Island, Rama, Beausoleil, and Georgina Island First Nations. Trent Lakes respectfully acknowledges that the Williams Treaty First Nations are the stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain this responsibility to ensure their health and integrity for generations to come. We will now take a moment to reflect on these principles and our duties and responsibilities as members of Council. Thank you, everyone. Now we can move on to item 2 of our agenda, which is the approval of the agenda as circulated. I would entertain a motion for same. Councillor Braybrook for a mover, Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. Now we can move on to item 3 of the agenda, which is disclosure of pecuniary interest. If any member of council has a pecuniary interest on this item on the agenda or any item on the agenda, please disclose it now or anytime during the meeting prior to discussing anything that you have a pecuniary interest in. I am seeing no hands. We can move on to item 4 of our agenda, which is our statutory public meeting pursuant to the Planning Act. I would ask Adele Arbor to, I need to have a motion, sorry, my apologies. I need a motion to suspend our special meeting and move into our public meeting. I see Deputy Mayor Armstrong for a mover and Councillor Franzen for a seconder. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion is carried. We are now in our public meeting, and I will ask Adele Arbor, our planner, to please do your preamble.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor Lamshead, this is a public meeting under sections 17, 22, and 34 of the Planning Act to consider an amendment to the municipality's official plan and comprehensive zoning bylaw. A notice of public meeting for today's applications containing the prescribed information was circulated to all landowners within a 120-meter radius of the subject land and to all property owners located on Elwood Crescent. And this circulation was done at least 20 days prior to this meeting, and a sign was posted on the subject land, all in accordance with the Planning Act. The notice was also mailed to all prescribed agencies, public bodies, and persons in accordance with the regulations. Anyone wanting to be notified of any decision from today's public meeting must either inform myself or the clerk, and the notice of passing would be mailed to them, setting out the method and manner in which appeals may be made to the Ontario Land Tribunal. If a person does not send in a written comment prior to the passing of a bylaw or make an oral submission at a public meeting, that person may not be entitled to appeal the decision.
Okay, thank you very much. I could just ask the 2 gentlemen in the gallery to please remove your hats. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, and I think Adele, you would like to please introduce the file.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Lamshead, this is a second public meeting for official plan and zoning bylaw amendments for a proposed 58-lot plan of subdivision located at 168 County Road 49. The official plan amendment pertains to a settlement boundary expansion at both the municipal and county levels. The initial public meeting was held on September 16, 2025, which resulted in a number of concerns being raised by the public. Council recommended that staff address the issues raised at the public meeting through a staff report at a future meeting, and further that staff increase the public circulation area of these applications to include all residents of Elwood Crescent. Subsequent to responses provided by the applicant's planning consultant, Planscape, municipal staff required further clarification as to the additional information and testing provided with respect to water supply and nitrate attenuation calculations. A meeting was held with the proponents, the technical team from Cambium, municipal staff, and the municipality's peer reviewer. This resulted in no further outstanding hydrogeological issues, and all municipal concerns were addressed. An interim report was prepared by planning staff to address the various comments and concerns raised at the September 16th meeting and was presented to council on April 7th. The interim report, which detailed responses to public concerns, was added to the municipal website, and the public meeting notice included a link to the interim report in advance of today's public meeting. This was to ensure that the public had access to responses provided prior to today's meeting. Planscape, during their presentation, will go into detail on how the public concerns have been addressed. The only agency comments received to date are from MTO, and they had no comments as the lands are not within their permit control area. Public submissions we received were emails from Brian Dalzell of Elwood Crescent, who expressed concerns with water supply, septic systems, and impact on existing development on Elwood Crescent. Carrie and Sharon Leach of Moonline Road are opposed to this development. Concerns with water supply, increased traffic, sewage, garbage, and impact to existing homeowners. These three pieces of correspondence were circulated as part of the agenda. No other public comments have been received to date. The applicant's planning consultant will provide a PowerPoint presentation, and in attendance, we also have representatives from Cambium and Biddle Engineering to answer any technical questions that council may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adele. Does council have any comments or questions for Adele? Not at this time. I think we can move along here and we can get Debbie, if you would like to come up and do your presentation, then we can have some questions after.
Does anybody mind if I sit this way?
No, absolutely not. Go right ahead. So turn the mic in your direction.
Thank you.
Just so we can
You
all
have
hear
my
the
back.
line.
Good morning. Nice to see everybody again. All right. Okay. I need to push the button.
I think you didn't. Yeah, I think it was all set up for you.
You can hear me okay through this? I don't feel like it's.
No, it doesn't. Okay, it doesn't amplify in the room.
It
You have to
amplifies
speak
for
up
the
for the
online.
online people. So.
Thank you. I'll stop listening for myself then. Okay. Good morning once again, everybody. My name is Debbie Vandenacker. I am the manager of planning at Planscape out of Bracebridge. Nice to see everybody. And there's some familiar faces here from last time. So thank you for coming out again. We have Kevin, as Adele said, from Cambium. Can you give a wave, please? And we have David from DG Biddle Engineering. So these are the technical folks that if you've got additional questions about the information that I'm going to present, that can answer those directly for you. And as you know, we provided these written responses to the questions raised in September. So hopefully everybody has had an opportunity to read and review those. And so my presentation today is a brief overview of the project, just for those who are unfamiliar. And then I'll go through what we heard in September, and I will summarize the responses. And then if you've got follow-up questions, we've got technical experts here. Okay, so these are the applications that are involved in this project. There is a County of Peterborough requirement for approval for the official plan amendment, so to expand the boundary of the settlement area, and then for a plan of subdivision. And then for the Trent Lakes level of approval, there's an official plan amendment as well and a zoning bylaw amendment. So this is the location of the proposed site, and this is the draft plan. So 58 estate residential lots. There is a wetland feature in the middle that you can see. It's about 4 hectares, and it's been buffered for additional protection as is required. The lots range in size, but they do meet the minimum zoning requirement of 0.4 hectares at the smallest. It goes up to over a hectare in size, depending on the lot configuration. And that size is to allow for private servicing, so big enough for well and septic to be on site. And then there is one access from County Road 49, and there's another access from Moonline Road. So as part of these applications, these technical reports have been submitted and they have also been peer reviewed. So that means that another set of experts other than the ones hired by the applicants have reviewed the documentation and basically given their sign off. So archaeological has been looked at. There's been an environmental impact study done. So the delineation of those, that wetland feature and the culvert off Moonline Road, that was done through the EIS. There's been a hydrogeological assessment, a geotechnical assessment, a functional servicing and stormwater management report. Basically, that means all the water that's on site has to stay on site. And so that's the technical piece of how that's done. Then there's a servicing plan and a transportation impact study. So for the official plan amendment level of approval, just remember that there's 2 levels here. These are the requested designation changes. So I don't know if anybody's ever read an official plan, likely not, it's not really exciting reading, but there's a thing called a designation. So right now, the second part, the northern half of this application is in the rural designation. This application will expand the boundary, so that red outlined portion will bring that into the settlement area. And because we're doing that, the designation then changes to hamlet. So this is that official plan level of approval. And then underneath that at the Trent Lakes level of approval is the zoning bylaw amendment. So we've described phase 1 lands to the south and then phase 2 lands to the north. And because the phase 1 lands are already within your settlement area boundary now, the phase 2 lands, we're applying to bring them into that. Then there will be an exception zone, so HR 13, and that's to recognize 1 additional dwelling unit and a maximum accessory dwelling area of 118 square meters. And then there's exception zone HR 14 to recognize 1 additional dwelling unit and a maximum accessory dwelling unit of 118 meters squared, and deficient lot frontage. So you can see that the roads curve and all the lots curve. And so sometimes the frontage of where the lot is can't meet the minimum standard. And so when that happens, you have to have an exception to your zoning to recognize that. So all the exception number means is that the lot meets all of the provisions of the hamlet residential set of rules that you have in your zoning bylaw, and the exception provides for where it needs to differ. So this is the detail. This image just shows where the difference of those exception lots are going to go. It's a little bit difficult to see in terms of differentiation of hatching and coloring, but basically those are the different exceptions. So as you can see, the ones with the deficient lot frontage are the ones that are on the corner road piece. And so the front of the lot gets pretty narrow and then it expands out the back. So we do recognize that in the applications. So that's it for the application summary itself. That goes over the basics of what we're trying to do. And so there has been work since September when we came to you and, oh, sorry. No one should give me such control. Oh, and again. Okay, so it's not me. I'm really doing it one time. Okay, so we were here September 16, 2025. And so we had that statutory public meeting. And so at that meeting, a lot of the concerns that came up were about well water. How do you make sure that this application and these new lots are not going to impact the wells that you already have in place? And so completely understandable concerns. There has been work done since then to add confirmation. So just to be really clear, to get to this point in the statutory public meeting, there were no concerns with the initial studies that were done. We have done additional work to add that level of comfort since then. So staff, so in September, we had the statutory public meeting, and then we had responses to the concerns were submitted to staff from us on December 3rd. And then staff sent a letter in response back to us in January asking for some additional clarifications. And then in November, so remember the really dry conditions of last year, at the end of November, there was an additional well drilled and some additional testing done. So in those sort of fall drought conditions, we're really comfortable that that represented like a worst case scenario of your water levels in last year's scenario. So we'll talk about, sorry, one additional, yes. And then a staff report, peer reviewed. And so as Adele mentioned, that there was a meeting with the technical team and the peer reviewing team. Peer review team had some questions about the technical report that was provided. Following that meeting, everybody's concerns were satisfied, and now we are here. So these are the key concerns that we heard by theme. The first one was about that barn. So a minimum distance separation formula, it's called an MDS. very briefly, for those that you don't know, this is a provincial requirement to separate conflicting land uses with farms. So if you want to expand your farm, it has to be far enough away from sensitive land uses, typically homes. If you want to add more homes, you have to make sure that it's not too close to an existing farm. And so that's the calculation that we ran. There was a concern with one barn in that situation, in our calculation. So it can be handled in a number of ways. I'm not sure where that landed, but there is an application for that farm that may end up change their zoning, which would make that situation moot. If not, we can always adjust the zoning for that lot. So there's like a little band that comes into the back of that lot. We can recognize the deficiency there if that's required. Confirming well water levels, big issue, big concern at the last meeting. Well water quantity, so I've grouped those together in sort of the response slide. There was a question about well water fracking, feature-based water balance, stormwater runoff in the south portion of the wetland, and we'll show you an image of how that will be captured. Septic calculations and the additional residential units that are being proposed as part of the application, traffic impacts, the entrance off Moonline Road, and then the additional residential units and servicing concerns came up as well. So just got a slide for each of these. To hopefully give you the level of information that you need to be comfortable that these concerns have been addressed. So again, with this barn, you can see, is there a pointer on this? Oh no, oh, does it disappear? I bought one and it disappears on the screen. It was a cat toy, so it was, yeah. Anyway, I tried. So the red circle closest to the application boundary box, you can see how the red just sort of dips into the application box. That's the barn that we were speaking about. And I don't actually know the status of what that application is, but it's overall staff had deemed it not a concern that we couldn't overcome. And so whatever the specific solution ends up being to that, it can be done. So confirming well water levels. I'm sorry, I'm going to be pretty boring here. I'm going to read off the slide. I never want to use my planning background to presuppose wording for technical experts, so I will do that. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to take questions.
No, we'll do questions after you're done. Yeah.
I can turn my voice up. Yes. Okay, I will do that. Sorry about that. And I apologize if my back ends up being to you. If you can't hear me, please let me know. Okay. So the original technical work for the well water investigations was done by a company called JP2G in October of 2021. There was additional well testing done in November 2025 with a new well dug. So it's been monitored over time, and then a new well dug in 2025 to add some additional clarification. So the hydrogeological study was undertaken per provincial guidance. So this isn't something that we as a team decide. This is provided to experts to follow the right methodology. It inherently takes into consideration surrounding lands as it determines if there is acceptable quantity and recharge on site to support the proposed wells. By concluding that there is sufficient quantity and recharge, the study indicates that no impacts are expected to surrounding wells. Again, there are hydrogeological experts in the room today if you've got follow-up questions to that, but essentially the study said after doing that confirming work and re-looking at the data, there is not expected to be impacts to the wells to the south or anywhere off-site, period. Sorry, I should confirm. Okay, so Cambium reports that based on the pumping test data and water supply assessment presented for phase 1, that's the work that it was done in 2021. It does adhere to the procedures of the D55 guideline. Again, it's a provincial guideline that you have to follow. And it said that water supply can be adequately sourced without significant off-site well interference. Cambium completed supplemental hydraulic tests to validate the JP2G water supply assessment results from the original technical submission at the site. So 2 different companies have confirmed this information. Cambium returned to the site November 4th and 5th of 2025 to hydraulically test 2 of the existing 4 wells on site to confirm the conclusions from JP2G, and an additional test well in the phase 2 area was also installed. So the conclusion was that one well, it's called TW2 for any of you that actually read the technical report on it, may require added storage to accommodate peak demand usage, but all other test wells met the single home requirements as well as the requirement for an additional residential unit. So again, the conclusion was satisfactory in terms of what is being proposed. And technical details can be confirmed if you've got additional questions. So the question about well water fracking, this one was interesting for me. I needed to ask the question as well, what it was and what it was for. Essentially, if you're having trouble with water flow, sometimes they do well fracking. I picture it like almost like going to the dentist and getting that water pick and flushing out the spaces between your teeth. That's how I imagine what it looks like. But the technical experts have responded to this concern and basically said, none of this that is not an expected or definitely not a requirement for well water quantity, certainly not on site, and it's not anticipated for off-site wells either. So the feature-based water balance, this has to do with that wetland in the middle, that 4-hectare wetland that's being protected. It is underway and anticipated to be completed in May, June of 2026 to better understand the wetland's hydro period, its hydraulic capacity, and to inform potential site-specific mitigation strategies for the wetland. So this work doesn't impact the proposed draft 58 lots, but it will help protect the wetland function through mitigation measures. So there's nothing about the protection of this wetland that experts have said, no, we need to consider how many lots or the configuration of what's being proposed. This is just to make sure that when during construction and with the construction of the lots, that it is protected to the best of all technical abilities. So water levels have been measured within the wetland and on the surrounding site monthly over the past year to establish groundwater highs and lows. Currently, it's established that the wetland is connected to the water table. So following Cambium's hydrogeological assessment, no groundwater impacts are anticipated as a result of the development. As such, there will be no impacts to the wetland from loss of groundwater. So connected sites, surface and groundwater, they've determined that there won't be any impacts. So the feature-based water balance is required to determine the volume of potential stormwater inputs to the wetland. By establishing the hydro period of the wetland, so the seasonal highs and lows, the capacity of the wetland to accommodate the addition of stormwater can be determined through the feature-based water balance to ensure that there will be no net change and no net impacts to the wetland. So same as you capture the water on site in terms of lots and roofs and all of those things, you want to maintain what is existing naturally for that wetland. And so that's what the feature-based water balance assesses. Okay, so this is about the stormwater runoff in the south portion. So highlighted in blue is the easement I want to use the right words, in favor of the municipality. And so that exists today. That is where the water will continue to flow. The concern was, is there going to be additional flows coming out of that? The technical study has determined that no, in fact, there will not be additional flows because, again, the principle is that the water that is on the site before the development stays on the site after the development. And so how you build it and how you capture the water is how you make sure that that happens. So that is where that water will continue to exit. Okay, septic calculations and the additional residential units. So going to get technical again, sorry. The daily sewage flow volume of 1,000 liters per day used in the nitrate attenuation assessment is the average daily sewage effluent flow volume outlined in the MECP, so the provincial procedures, which are D54 if you ever wanted to look it up, which was followed in preparing the calculations. So conversely, a rate of 2,000 liters per day is used for a 4-bedroom house under the Ontario Building Code. So there's two separate levels that are being assessed under two separate sets of rules here. Septic systems in the subject property will be required to be designed based on the maximum daily sewage flows referenced in Part 8 of the Ontario Building Code. So Cambium prepared an additional assessment of nitrate attenuation of the development area on the east side of the wetland area based on concerns raised by the peer reviewers. So remember, after we submitted responses to the municipality, and then the peer review team came back after having looking at the information, met with our technical team again, and then provided some additional calculation. That's what I'm going to speak to now. So the dilution area on the west side includes the wetland dilution factor. Easiest way to think is water flowing this way. The wetland captures the stuff on the, never eat, try to eat, west side, not on the east side. That's basically how you can visualize it. So a sewage flow of 1,490 liters per day was estimated based on the following: 1,000 liters per day for the proposed single detached dwelling, 490 liters per day for the additional residential unit. So remember, as part of the zoning application, we are requesting that one additional residential unit that is above the size that's currently in your zoning bylaw be permitted as part of the approvals. For the west side of the development, the site could be developed to accommodate the 32 lots, including 32 ARUs without any issue. On the east side, it was determined that it can accommodate 26 detached dwellings and 22 ARUs. So if there was 100% uptake in the number of people that wanted additional residential units included in the homes to be built for them, 4 of those additional residential units would need treatment option considerations. And so there's a number of technical ways to do that. The solution to this potential issue has not quite been decided, but in order to, additional residential units are a relatively new concept, with the province wanting it to be a tool to enhance the number of dwelling units available in Ontario. It's part of the tool set for addressing the housing crisis. So what the new rule under the PPS says is that in settlement areas with urban lots, which means service, you've got water and you've got municipal septic systems, septic services, you are permitted an additional residential unit, actually 2 as of right. So the difference here is that this is on private servicing. And so under the zoning bylaw requests that we are making, that's how we're trying to recognize the availability for people to take the opportunity to have an additional residential unit without having to go back and rezone for it. So in the research I did, because this is a relatively new concept, there is, and it's basically an AI generated research tool that I needed to do. There is no provincial data for this, but basically I said, what is the average level of uptake in settlement areas that are fully serviced for people taking additional residential units? So all settlement areas right now for over a year, about a year, have had the opportunity for these as of right additional residential units. So you can kind of make a reasonable assumption about that uptake. It's about 20 to 25% of the people that can do this actually do, because you remember, you need to want to, and you need to have the funds to be able to get your building permits and do the renovations and all those things. So conversely then, what I needed to understand was how many additional residential units could reasonably be expected to be taken advantage of where there is not public servicing. And so that came back about 6 to 12 units on this site could reasonably expected. So if you put that in the context of what the data says, 26 units on this side of the development, 22 ARUs could be taken up. That is many more than what is expected in the typical uptake from the research. That's not to say that it is not impossible to have 100% uptake. It's not statistically reasonable to assume that. And yet, we'll make sure that there is a response and a tool available for managing that outcome should it come to pass. All right, on to traffic. So in 2022, Greer-Galloway conducted a transportation impact assessment. It was later confirmed by NextTrans in February of 2024. They did some additional work after the peer review of that report was done. And so the outcome of that study was that the site is projected to operate with residual capacity, with excellent levels of service, and with manageable delay and queue lengths during both AM and peak hour periods. So essentially, the traffic impact study came back and said there is no mitigatable, there is no impact that needs to be addressed from this site. There were several other concerns, things like speed and ditching and water flow and things like that we heard in September. Those issues aren't something that can be dealt with through this application, so I have not tried to address them in the presentation at all. So there's a question about the entrance off of Moonline Road and that it traverses a water course. So that water course was assessed through the EIS. The EIS determined that it didn't meet the standards of protection, and therefore a culvert will be installed to maintain the water flow. But the standard is not to need to protect that in its naturalized state. So that is what we heard. That is where we are in the process of this project. Again, technical experts are here. I'm happy to answer anything in terms of process land use planning, but we're open to questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I just wonder if Kevin or David want to say anything before we start asking questions. Okay, we can start with questions from the gallery. please raise your hand and state your name for the record. If we have one up front here, go ahead, please.
Brian Delzell. My understanding is, just to track the history of this, it was originally going to be 26 homes, then I heard 52, and now I'm hearing 58. Is that correct?
Go ahead.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you. As it has progressed, so there's a phase 1 and a phase 2. Phase 1 was initially assessed because prior to the change in the provincial plan, you used to have to wait for a municipal comprehensive review, which means a very comprehensive study to update an OP before you could add or remove lands from your settlement boundary. In one of the provincial changes, that requirement was removed, and so we could assess phase 2 at the same time. So that's why the numbers grew.
So the water test that was done, there's plenty of water for the people that are getting the new houses.
Yes.
Nobody's come to my place and asked about gallons per minute or flow or quality or anything else at this point. So where's the benchmark for if you put this in and we've got problems down the hill? Where's the quality control to?
Thank you.
The action we can take.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I will pass this on, but just so you know, water on site, remember, they test and the standards have to stay the same on the site. So if you have well issues, and that's what I heard pretty clearly in September, there are already existing well issues. This development will not improve or make those worse. Does somebody do you want to come up and speak to that? Thank you.
Easier to stand here. I'll kind of, if that's okay, council.
If you can kind of speak towards that mic, that would be great. Because
Speak towards the mic.
online-
All right, we'll do
people
that.
online
Turn
can't
the
hear
mic.
you, so.
Actually, I'll stand. It's fine. Okay. Water is always a concern. I've been doing this job in consulting for 27 years. This type of development for that length of time, right? I'm on a well myself. Water is always important. Water is a concern. This is why we do the studies. To walk you through the guidelines, and I'm going to answer your question on concerns for offsite wells. The guidelines that we follow were established in the Ministry of Environment in the mid-90s. So we've been using these for 30 years. It's a procedure, a guideline, D54, D55. D55 is the water supply regulation. The requirements of that is how many wells have to be situated on the site, which is why we added one for phase 2 to make 5 because of the size of the property. It's the duration and the rate that we need to test. The minimum rate is usually 13.7 liters a minute, which is a bunch of peak factors that go into that, and the duration's for 6 hours. So when we test one of these, and this is roughly just over 3 gallons a minute, for 6 hours, we test this. So we're over pumping these wells. We're taking about 6, 7, 8,000 liters out of these wells during the course of a pumping test, if we're doing a 6-hour test. The peak usage on a septic system is 2,000 liters. That's max, worst. Everyone's using everything in the laundry that day, but typically on average, a house uses 1,000 liters a day. So again, when we're doing a pumping test, we're pumping well over what a house typically uses. And I want to put that in for context. When we're doing the pumping tests, what we're measuring is we're pumping one well on the site, and then we're monitoring the water levels at the closest wells, which are the other wells on the site. So in that case, we've done 3 ourselves, pumping tests that we did in early November. We pump one well, we monitor the closest wells around it. If you are going to see any interference on an adjacent well that's not being used, that's when you're going to see it. You're going to see it on the closest wells. We did not see any significant impact, interference on the wells that we were pumping during the November pumping tests. So there's not going to be any interference with the water use on the site. So the wells that are off-site further away, there's not going to be any impacts from this water use either.
There's a difference between horizontal and downhill. Is there not?
Water always flows downhill, but 6 years university to tell you that. It gets complex because it depends on where the downhill is and how far, because we're talking on a regional use. And in this case, we're into fractured limestone. Now, generally the bedding is very flat, it's linear. We don't have a lot of folding things that happen with the limestone. So generally there's a slight southern tilt, but generally limestone the bedding is pretty horizontal. most of the fractures that occur between bedding planes and the different formations of the limestone. So the fractures are fairly horizontal, right? To give you context. The problem is you have to think of it as a layer cake and how many fractures you're connected to. And depending on how deep your well is. For example, we had 2 wells that were 30 meters. They're the shallowest 2 wells. The other 3 wells are much deeper. The lowest flow rate that we found in the November confirmatory testing was in one of the 30-meter wells, which probably has some more superficial fractures that in the spring gives it more water, but in the fall there was lower yielding, which is why we only had 8 liters a minute compared to the previous testing by JP2G. I think they did their testing in May, lots more water, those surface fractures are full, so we had more. The other 2 wells were still very strong. They have deeper fractures that they're connected to. So when we're pulling water out of a well, we're pulling it from all those fractures, right, equal. And in that case, and what happens is you get a drawdown cone that forms. That's that zone of interference that we're worried about. And in that case, when we're pulling water out of one well, we're not seeing it from the other. Everything else kind of mixes and goes through. So again, if we're not seeing like the amount that the water that each one of these residents is going to take is small compared to the context of what's going through the whole landscape in the regional aquifer. If there's issues in some of the wells and in the area, which I understand from the previous public meeting, some people have had lower yielding wells and whatnot too. And again, we haven't investigated those wells offsite. That's a whole different thing to do. My guess is otherwise the fracture system is just not as robust there. The fracture systems do vary across the area, which is why we have to spread out the wells and test it, confirm, right? We can't just go with well records and whatnot in the area. My other hypothesis on that, at least some of the lower yielding wells, is that the wells are probably not as deep.
I'm down at 180 feet.
Okay.
I have 2 gallons per minute. If the bank wanted to give someone a mortgage to buy my house, they won't give them a mortgage. So the value of my house goes down if I get anything worse than what I've got now.
That's
my
understood.
concern. So what is the recourse if that happens?
Well, again, the recourse is we've done our study. Our study's been vetted by another hydrogeologist, and they found, again, no issues. They agreed with our findings that there's not going to be any impacts from these water takings off-site. Your recourse is if you feel there's the Ontario Water Resources Act. The recourse in that is you're not allowed to interfere with someone else's water in Ontario. We all have equal rights to water. It's the fabric. We don't have water rights. We don't have history of water uses. It's not the states. In Canada, everyone has equal rights to the water. It doesn't matter how long you've been there or what. So your recourse is to contact your local environmental officer with the Ministry of Environment. If you have well interference and you feel it's from that, they will do an independent investigation. And then they will find if for the example, the development's at fault, like they're going to have to mitigate your well, fix it, whatnot.
Okay. Anyone else have a question? Gentleman back there, please stand and state your name for the record.
Terry Scully, I live at 55 Moonline Road North. I want to talk about the traffic study that you did. Okay. I come down that road all the time. You need to know that one of the things I did in my career was data management. And I understand that there are right ways and wrong ways in which to conduct surveys. If you're measuring Moonline Road North, you weren't measuring Moonline Road North. Because your little bands that were hiding down there on the side of the road were on Moonline. So those of us who live on Moonline Road could not be included in your survey because you weren't there on our road. And our road has an entrance and an exit going up to the development, which really has an impact on our road, not on Moonline Road, our road. So why wasn't there a nice little band up there conducting survey on our road? Moonline North. Therefore, the data that you're presenting about the impact of traffic up and down in our area is really false.
Go ahead, Debbie.
Thank you. Let me preface this by saying I'm not a traffic engineer.
Neither am I, but I do know that when you conduct a survey, make sure that your survey has in fact all the data that's related to what it is that you want to investigate. And you haven't investigated our road. And John knows, sorry,
Yeah.
morning, John. And John knows that there are some concerns about all of us up our road because we have Ranch Road coming down from Stephanie, whatever it is, and they come down our road. And then we have our dear friends of the snowmobile trail who come up our road and think that they own both sides of the road. So we have all of this going on in winter time. And then we have a whole whack of people coming down in the times when Ranch Road is enclosed, because that way they can escape the four-way stop down at the Shell service station. I know what it takes. And thanks to John, we were actually able to get a speed sign on our road. You can imagine, we never had a speed sign on our road, which basically said the speed here is 60 kilometers an hour. Hence, you wonder why they're going 100, because they probably think they're still out on the other road. Thank you, John.
Thank you for your question. I think it's a question, but it's, I mean, yeah, we need to have the valuable data.
I'm going to treat it as a question to answer what I can. So me not being the transportation engineer, the study was conducted by two separate qualified transportation engineers and then vetted by a third. So we have to assume that they are following the protocols for that. Nobody would sign off on the peer review if it wasn't. I understand it's very common for applications like this to bring out the existing problems that are happening on roads and create concerns with residents that those concerns are going to be exacerbated. I can only suggest that whatever tools you have at your disposal to try to fix the existing issues that are happening, that would be the first step. So the numbers do not indicate that there is going to be traffic impact issues from this development.
Gee, how do you say that, man? When the survey was only done at Moonline Road, not Moonline
I don't
North.
say it, the
So
engineers.
then they need to go back and reconduct that survey again on both our road and the other road. Because when you look at Moonline Road, what are they trying to study? Are they looking at new traffic that's coming up or the existing traffic that's there? So that's people who live there.
They are
But all you
looking
have to
at-
do is go to each house and count the number of cars, and that'll tell you how many vehicles would go up and down that road.
Yeah.
It doesn't tell you about the new people that are coming up and down that road, because it didn't do that. They were just sitting there. I watched them every day, and I laughed at this because this is what I used to do for a living. And I look at this and I say, and they're gonna use that data to tell us that the road is okay. There's not gonna be a ton of traffic coming up that road, unfortunately. What about the other side of Moonline? So you get half the horseshoe only studied. And then you look at the people who are coming in, where are these people going? Maybe they're going up Elwood. Maybe they're just living on Moonline. Maybe they're coming up Moonline North. Who knows? But nobody was up Moonline North to check to see what was going on there. And remember that we also have an application from Mr. Godfrey of 2 lots on the other side. So that would be the east side of Moonline Road, which is opposite the entrance going up to the development. So now here you've got people who are gonna buy a house there, who are at the entranceway of this going up here, but on the other side. So now you're gonna have a nice little bottleneck going on. God forbid the joy that we will have with the snowmobilers. I apologize to those of us who are snowmobilers. I'm not one. But that would be a real challenge. We already had one dog killed on our street, and my neighbor and I almost got hit twice from that issue. And just think about all the other vehicles that are coming in and out of that development.
Okay, thank you for
I
your
don't wanna
comments.
be there.
Thank you for your comments.
Okay.
Most vehicles don't just jump on the beginning of Moonline Road. They have to drive on Moonline Road to get onto Moonline Road North. So most of that traffic is kind of captured one way or another. Thank you for your comments. Okay, who's next for questions? Yep, please state your name for the record and
Brad Clark, I'm at 193 Elwood. And I have some questions for the gentleman who was talking about the well.
okay.
From what I heard, correct me if I'm wrong, they're using a daily sewage flow of 1,490 liters a day, which would include the home and the ARU. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
1,490 liters per day, according to part 8 of, the building code, doesn't even support a 3-bedroom home.
Yeah, I touched on that, I think, in my initial comments. There's a difference between, if you look at the Ontario Part A of Ontario Building Code and then Ontario Regulation D54, and I'll explain the differences. Part 8 of the Building Code, when we design septic systems, I also have my BCIN, I design septic systems. When we design septic systems, we design them for the peak daily use maximum possible that could happen to make sure when septics are used, we are not going to flood them or put them in. That's how they're designed. That's where the 2,000 liters comes from for a 4-bedroom house.
That's total daily sewage. It's not peak.
Yeah, and that's the total daily sewage flow is the peak. There is no above that. That is the maximum. The 2,000 is what is expected in 2,000 liters when they call it the total daily sewage flow. That's the most that they expect from it. On average, we don't have that every single day for a residence for a septic system. So if it's designed for 2,000 liters a day, they might hit that once a week when you're doing laundry and a bunch of other stuff. So what we're using is D54, which is
Just
on
make sure your comments
hydrogeology.
and
We're
questions
talking
go
about
through the chair,
contaminant
please.
hydrogeology and nitrate. Sorry, what's that?
Yeah, just making sure that our comments and questions go through the chair, so it's not a one-on-one.
Okay. When we're commenting on the nitrate loading, which is what we're concerned about here, the nitrate dilution, we're looking at the average use over time. Because when we're talking about contaminant plumes for nitrate and hydrogeology, it's not peak usage, it's what we expect over time, which is going to be the average use, which is where D54 has the established rate of 1,000 liters a day per residence. Now, we added to that with the ARU to make the 1490.
Okay. So you're saying peak use, there's nothing anywhere that says that peak use can't happen daily. And it also goes on to say that if you're building a bigger home, 2,000 liters per day for a 4-bedroom home is not sufficient to meet Ontario Building Code designed for the sewage system. Any of these homes, if they exceed the 1,490, which is what's being used as the peak sewage flow, when applications are made to the local department here, municipality, for sewage system permits, there's not going to be one application that arrives with this municipality that is going to be 1,490 liters or less.
Mayor, through you, in response. Again, there's a fundamental difference on the two numbers we're talking about. The 1,490 is not the design flow for any of the houses. Hopefully I can establish that. That's what we expect the average use is going to be over time for this development when we factor in all the number of units, right? That projects how much nitrate we expect in the groundwater. And again, this is a tool we've been using for 30 years that the Ministry of Environment has led us. It's very conservative. It only accounts for dilution, not attenuation, and a bunch of other uptake process that happen to nitrate in groundwater. It's straightly just, is there enough dilution that happens on the site that we will not have an adverse issue on nitrate at the property boundary, okay, for context. That's where the 1,490 comes in. Again, it's a per unit average use. Yes, you could have larger homes that are going to require a larger septic system being built under the building code. But again, on average use, they all kind of average out. Not every house is going to be built with those larger systems. And again, when you design a septic system, I've designed ones where for 5-bedroom, 6-bedroom houses that are 3,000 liters a day, and there's only 3 people living there. Today, but they have to be built on the maximum use that could theoretically happen, right? And that happens on the design standpoint after the fact. When we're trying to predict what the contaminant will be from the nitrate, we have to use the average use. And again, that's where for a 4-bedroom house, it's 1,000 liters a day. So that's the number we've used. We've been using it for 30 years. And then again, we tacked on an additional 490, which was the ARUs, which I believe as the planner had mentioned, likely will not have full uptake. But we assumed full with that to figure that in. And we're still below the threshold that's required to make sure that there's no adverse impacts from nitrates offsite.
Yep, through you, just. Yeah.
So you're
Let him
using,
finish.
nitrate seems to be your concern, where my concern is not only nitrates, it's also on the effect on the neighboring well. if it exceeds the 1490. I believe the study said that the nitrate level at the border was going to be 8.2. I'm not positive.
Yeah, it's, what was it? Well, it depends on which one we're looking at. If we're talking for the full ARUs for the full site, it was with, again, 58 ARUs was 9.28. Before that, if it was just the 58 lots, it was 6.75. We're all under the 10. Yes.
So the 14.
Yeah.
Can I continue? Or that's
Yeah, no, carry on. Yeah.
Okay.
You've got a couple of minutes.
You said 9.6 was with the including the ARUs at 1,490 liters per day.
Yeah, there's a lot, 9.3 for 58 lots and 58 ARUs for the whole site.
So I think we've kind of already established that 1,490 is probably not very generous for the daily sewage flows that could be expected, especially when we consider parties of the Ontario Building Code. And we've only got 0.7 of a buffer for the nitrate levels before they exceed 10 at the borders. It's not very significant, especially if we're using 1,490 liters per day per property.
Again, Mayor, in response
Yes,
to
go
you.
ahead, please.
Again, two concepts, and as far as the fundamental part is that the 1490 again is on average use, and it's when you design a septic system for, say, if it's 2,000 liters a day, you're not going to have 2,000 liters a day every single day. You're going to have that maybe once a week in general, right? Septic systems are over designed, and that's where those numbers come in from Part 8 of the building code. So first part is I would disagree that when you're saying it's not a generous amount on the 1490, that is a much higher value than we typically do for these subdivisions because we're including the ARUs on it, which we also realize that we're probably not going to have the uptake. So that's thing one is there already is a lot of conservatism built into just using that 1490 for all these lots to come up with the nitrate dilution. The second part is and again with the guideline D54, it's a very conservative mechanism in that we're only accounting for dilution. So if we can say there's enough dilution on that property and that you're going to be under 10, we're actually going to see a value much less than that if we actually want to monitor the groundwater concentration for nitrate, right, for neighboring wells. And that's because there's a lot of other processes at play, attenuation, uptake, and whatnot from bacteria, from plants, and all sorts of stuff that happens in that nitrate. It's hard to measure that. The easy one to measure is just, is there enough dilution? Because we can look at the precipitation and the infiltration and all that stuff. That's why the Ministry of Environment says just do the dilution. So it's a very simple tool, but it's very conservative. There's already a lot built into that. So if we were to put monitoring wells right along the downgraded property boundary, and we would not see a value anywhere near what we predict because there's other processes at play. And the whole idea is as long as you're under the 10, like we're not going to see that value at the property boundary because all those other processes are at play in addition to the dilution, right?
But you're still assuming.
I'm not assuming. This is based on a long history of doing these types of studies.
You're still assuming the 1,490 liters per day.
Yes, that is the theoretical average use of all those residents.
So what would the sewage flow be if somebody built a 4-bedroom, 3,000 square foot home with a 1,000 square foot ARU? What would the sewage flow be then? By Ontario Building Code.
Again, Ontario Building Code, how I would design it is different. If to design the size of the septic system is over-designed, which are the numbers you're referencing from the building code. When I'm talking about contaminant hydrogeology and what we're predicting from the nitrate loading, it's different numbers that we use, and I'm trying to explain the reasons why. These are completely different numbers on why we use them.
I understand the reasons why.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that the person in any one of those homes could use more water. Just because you're telling us what an average is, that doesn't mean that I can't build a home in there and use twice as much water as the 1,490 and still be under my capacity for the sewer system.
Right. You might do that, and the other 57 people might not. Again, it goes by averages.
But if
There's a range of
1,
use.
10, 58.
Yeah, I can only speak to my own personal experience. I have a 3-bedroom house that 2 people live in. We do not produce anywhere near 1,490 liters per day,
I
ever.
agree.
Nor does my neighbor that now has one person living in the house. It's a 4-bedroom. And I think when you're developing that subdivision, many of those places are going to have 1 or 2 people living in them because that's what happens in Canada today. I think this gentleman has one more question about
No,
that.
because it'd take too long.
Okay, that's fair.
So. Another comment too. So is the developer gonna control that there's only gonna be 2 people per 4-bedroom home?
I absolutely doubt that because that's why we do the averages, right?
And what if they are Airbnb? Then according to your
I
bylaw,
think we,
they can have 2 people per bedroom.
Mhm.
So the 4-bedroom now is 8 people, not 2. And there's no control over somebody coming in as a renter, leaser, I don't care. There's no control on the water use that are presented by that.
that's where they would have to apply for a license and we'd make sure that their system is big enough for what they have. So
Yes, Terry, that's only the sewage system, that's not, it's well in excess of the 1,490 that's being used for the studies. I'm not saying that they're doing it wrong, they're doing it by what the provincial standard is. My concern is whether the provincial standard is really what's going on.
Well, I think we need to take it up with the province. I think that's the next step for that. I think that is maybe a concern, right? So thank you for that, bringing that to our attention. And I think that you had a question?
No, I just wanted to make a comment. I've
Please.
relocated here from living in the city for a number of years. Living on provided water from the municipality is a different lifestyle than living on a lot that has a well drilled and a septic system. You have to treat your water in a different way, meaning the respect to it. Not doing laundry every single day, not running your dishwasher every single day, not having hour-long showers. So are you guaranteeing that the people that are going to be buying these places are going to have that education about how to live in a situation where they have a well and a septic system so that they can stay within these guidelines?
And anyone of our, yeah, please, can I get your name, please, for
My name
just,
is Colleen Jenkins.
okay,
I live
thank
on
you.
Elgin.
Okay, thank you, Colleen.
Please.
All right, Mayor, through you, in response, we can't dictate what people are going to do. I couldn't tell you what people in a city use for how much water and a peak loading rate. The civil engineers might, because they design systems for that to say what the average use is. The peak usage are the numbers that we use that are built in, so the province developed on what people generally use for water. That peak usage wasn't necessarily just for people who are on wells. That's the provincial number for peak usage for what their value is, right? That's the factor that comes into what establishes our minimum pumping rate and how we develop, how much black water is going to come from this and everything that's built into that. So it's based on the peak usage of water. Generally, people use water 2 hours a day, maybe an hour in the morning later on average, right? Generally for a household, right? It really depends on what the average use is. But we design stuff for, again, septics are designed for the peak usage. That peak usage factor is worked into our pumping test to make sure the wells have enough yield. We over pump the wells based on that peak usage, right? But we also know from long-term studies with the Ministry of Environment that the average usage, people are not operating at the peak usage time and time and time again, right? So that's why there's a smaller value for the average use when we're figuring out the nitrate dilution factor. Again, that's not what you designed the septic for. Right? That's designed on the peak usage, and that's the rates established in the building code, right? So there's a lot of ways that are this conservative element that's built into this. One is we are over testing the wells on the site to make sure that they meet the provincial thresholds, which are conservative in nature. We're pumping them for 6 hours. We're pulling 7,000 liters per well out during a pumping test to make sure it has enough well yield. The septic design at a peak usage is only 2,000, and on average, we know is maybe only 1,000. And again, I'm not talking with the ARUs. You can add that factor onto it, right? So you can see there's a lot of elements that we're already over pumping, over testing to make sure there's enough wells or enough water in the aquifer to support this development, which there is, and that's been vetted. The septic system, they'll be designed for whatever is built for per house. We don't know what they're building yet, so we can't design all the septics. But we do know on average a household's 1,000 liters a day when we work it across the subdivision. And this is used throughout municipalities throughout Ontario, that's an established number that we use, which is 1,000 liters a day. That's the average use. I can't say what people from the city are going to do when they come out. I assume they're going to be like everyone else and probably not have hour-long showers continuously all the time. I've lived on municipal servicing. I'm on a well now. I've lived on a well before. I wouldn't say my duration of my shower has changed. Right.
I honestly, I think that there should be maybe a bit of an educational component to this, to try to teach people that, you know, you're on a well and septic now. You're not on municipal water with a sewage system that treats your stuff way miles away. So there should be some sort of educational component about, you're now on a septic well. This is what you don't put in your septic, and this is why you don't have hour-long showers. I mean, there's always an opportunity to educate people that are moving into our community. So thank you for that comment. Go ahead, sir.
Henry Leach, I live on Moonline Road, and I just want to know how many of these houses are going to need to access their property from Moonline Road North? Are all these houses going to be dumped out onto Moonline Road North, or are they going to be forced to use 49?
Good question.
26 on that side are accessing from Moonline Road.
From Moonline Road North. So 26 homes times 2 or 3 vehicles are going to be running up and down that road and Moonline Road, plus everybody else that lives up there. Isn't that a little excessive?
Through the chair.
Yep.
Yes.
From a local perspective, I understand what you're saying. Also, people aren't driving up and down the road just constantly every day.
Well, it
and
doesn't
so-
matter if they go to work
It's just
and
not
come
really-
back.
Right.
Everybody drives like an animal around here, so it's crazy. It's gonna be just craziness.
So the traffic tests are done on AM and PM peak periods. So it's used for that commuting time. It's when people are going to and from work. The standard is set that that's when you're evaluating the traffic impact. And the studies have come back that it's not going to impact your roads in such a way that you're going to see more people, obviously, but it's not going to create a standardized delay.
Gary, I'll tell you, Gary, I'll quit driving up and down that road because I use that road a lot, just because it's so nice to drive up and through there, nice and passive and quiet. And you go out and on Ranch Road and out on 49. And I take my time. I'm respectful for your neighbors and stuff, but I'll slow down. I won't go in there very often anymore.
Well,
That'll alleviate one.
Thank you for being respectful. It's not gonna happen when we get a bunch of idiots.
I went through Ranch Road in the middle of the winter. I probably shouldn't have done that. But thank you for your comment. I mean, traffic is a concern. We realize that, but only less than half of that subdivision comes out on Moonline North. I mean, we're not all coming out there. You're not going to have 100 vehicles at the same time come out there. Everybody leaves to go to work at a different time. They come home at a different time. So it will increase the traffic flow, but it seems to be the studies and the peer review of that study seems to confirm that it's not going to be that adverse. I mean, we know some people don't respect the rules of the road, but let's hope we can educate that too, because it's important that we respect each other on a road, right?
Maybe a couple speed limit signs and some speed bumps might be required.
Okay, go ahead.
What will it take to get it back to the 26 houses instead of the 58? I understand there's a lot of tax benefits for 58 houses. If our house is down the hill, and I understand, well, I don't understand all of the numbers and the jargon of the flow and this and that, because I just pretty standard guy. It just doesn't make sense to me that there is control over this. That if this doesn't work, okay, that my well goes below 2, or the water is not even potable anymore because there are more septics, or somebody else has got an extra bedroom, or God forbid Airbnbs. They don't give a damn how much water they use or how much comes down the hill to us, okay?
Mhm.
So why is it going from 26 to 58, other than to make money for the developer? Where is my protection for my mortgage, my house, the value of my home, which we paid big bucks for, okay? And bought good sized lots, so we're not all jammed in together. Where's the recourse? I'm sorry,
I think
I just don't see it.
I think some of it was already explained to you that it's MOECP. They, that's your recourse for your water. I think that's what you told. I'm not pretty sure. So that's your water
Have you heard the one about the checks?
No,
in
we're
the
not
mail
telling-
From the government, I'm here to help you.
We're not telling a joke now. Thank you for your comment. I appreciate it. Does anyone else have any comments? Please state your name for the record.
My name's Alan Junkin. I live on Elwood Crescent.
Yeah.
And something that has not been mentioned through these both sessions is that, and I know that the builder hasn't addressed it either, as to Hydro One Engineering is going to require a subdivision agreement. And the fact that you have 58 homes, they're going to require three-phase power. There is no three-phase power on Moonline North. There's no three-phase power on 49 Highway. It has to be brought down from Anderson Line for the subdivision. And I think you'll find, I'm addressing this to your planner here, that when you talk to hydro engineers, they're going to want that subdivision all fed three-phase with backfeed loops. And you'll have to tie the east and west through the green belt. They have to be tied together. It'll all have to be fed from 49 Highway. And the municipality, to me, should be insisting on a subdivision agreement with Hydro One before this advances any further, because the costs involved for the developer are going to be quite substantial. And Hydro Engineering might not approve the three-phase going through that green belt.
Okay.
For safety reasons. And it's never been mentioned in any of this, and that's one of the primary things you should have done. Get a subdivision agreement with Hydro One. It has to be three-phase for 58 houses. And the F1 feeder that feeds out down 36 towards Buckhorn is loaded. The only facility is your F2 feeder that comes across Anderson Line. And I'd like you to address that, why you've not approached Hydro One to get a subdivision agreement.
Okay, thank you for your question. Does anyone want to
And-
field that one?
And you people should have, you've got all those studies. That study should have been one of the first ones you did. And that's what you should insist on before you approve this.
Thank you. Thank you for your
Because
comments.
when he just covers what that cost is going to be, it's going to be quite substantial.
Okay, I think that's anyone want to field that? I think,
I
okay,
can
go
address it
ahead.
very generally.
Yeah,
So through you.
thank you.
Thank you. You seem to know a ton about that. That's it. That's not part of this process. So this is a land use planning approval. Even if we suppose that happens and it is very expensive for the developer, Ontario Hydro is an agency, or in Hydro One is an agency. They all get circulated on land use applications such as this one, so they are aware. It's just a different level and a different phase of the project where that is specifically addressed. So it's sort of a chicken and the egg. Hydro One is not going to look at something that's not approved for land use planning. Why would they? That's a presupposed thing. They would be doing work ahead of advance. So it's just a matter of this approval comes first and then that work gets done.
Oh, no, it shouldn't work that way.
It's the same thing as if you have just a rule thing. You don't get, Hydro won't come and do a layout until you have like a 911 number. So I know this is a little,
more advanced than that,
I'm
so
sure it is, but
Engineers should be on this.
Yeah. well, I think that's our next phase of this by the sounds of things. But thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. I've never had that comment. So that's a good comment. Thank you very kindly. Hey, anyone else want to speak? Okay. Any more comments from our, oh, go ahead, please.
My name's Kevin Acton, and I got a concern about the water table and what have you. According to Ontario Reg 190 or 170, I should say, using that formula there, as two-person household, 446 liters, and an old guy like me, I'm still in gallons, 98 gallons per day. That's one house. You multiply that by 58 lots, 58 houses. That comes out to 5,692 gallons per day. We got 35 homes in Elwood Crescent. We got 36 homes on Moon Line. If you add another 58, that's a total of 71 homes, and then add another 58, that's 129 homes in that area. If somebody can explain to me that drawing that kind of water out of the water table is not going to affect that water table and not lower it, I'm all ears. So if somebody can explain that to me, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, I think that's
Can I
get a
yours.
response?
Yeah, please, go ahead. Thank
I'm
you.
always popular at public meetings.
It sounds that way.
All right. Reg 170 is for designing regulated drinking water systems. So that's where those flow rates and whatnot come from. Now, those flow rates are a lot less than what we're looking at for pumping wells, right? But that's what those rates are from. It's if you have a municipal or a regulated drinking water, a communal system, that sort of thing, not individual houses, those are the rates you have to factor in for, per person and whatnot. Again, we have to separate. There's the water table, which is basically your unconfined aquifer. That's your first system. That means water's at basically at zero pressure. Water's always flowing downhill, right? Everyone knows that part. So it's basically the pressure of the gravity on it is what creates gauge pressure for creating the water table. So that's what's in the wetland. That's like when you dig down, you dig a hole the first time. If it fills up, that's the water table, right? Where we're taking water from is much deeper. It's into the limestone that, and our wells are, the shallowest ones are 30 meters. Water founds are, let's see here, where they actually take water from. I got the elevations here. They were 20 to 50 meters below ground surface, is depending on where the water is found. So they drill down, they're connecting to fractures into the limestone. So much deeper than what's happening on the water table. And there's not really a connection between the two because we're taking water from the groundwater from the limestone that's much deeper. It's from a different system. It's sourced potentially from further away versus what's happening in the water table. Now the water table, that's a concern when we're more so just constructing it. We do a pre and post development water balance to make sure that there's not really going to be any impacts or changes to the water table as a result of creating development, putting in roads, building houses. Most people's roof leaders in the country, they go off to the grass anyway, so we get a lot of recharge that way. But that stuff gets worked into when we're doing a pre and post development water balance, which looks at that as well as what the stormwater engineering factors that in. For concern too, what we're also monitoring is that wetland from everything that we've checked so far is connected to the water table. It's the water table across the whole site is connected. Not always the case with all wetlands, but in this case, the elevations, there is some upward welling, upward gradients and whatnot in the wetland. So that says there's groundwater coming into it. The elevations kind of fit into the monitoring wells we have at either side. So we have monitoring wells, not the drinking water wells, but monitoring wells also in just the water table. So we are monitoring that. We are looking at that as well. And from that, definitively, we're saying right now there's not going to be any impacts to the water table on the site or from the wetland as a result of this development. Again, we're not having any dewatering. We're not like the water usage that's going to happen is from a deeper aquifer system that's not necessarily connected to the water table.
With that test, you're not drawing 5,000 gallons a day.
No, sorry. Again, in response, when we're doing the pumping tests, we're pulling. When we're doing the pump tests, we're again 6-hour tests. We're looking at somewhere between 6, 7, 8,000. The TW3, the new well we put in, we pulled 9,540 liters out of it during the course of the test. So we're talking 2,500 just from that pumping test. So we're pulling more out. Again, it's a different rate that you're talking about, but that peak usage rate gets factored into what our peak usage rates need to be for well testing. And that's what we're testing, the flow rate, the duration, everything. It's, like I said, it's overkill as it is. And that's just how D55 is built, is to make sure if it works with D55 and D54, it's fine. It's a procedure we've been using for 30 years. Everyone still uses it because it's still very conservative. If it works that way, we know there's not going to be any issues or impacts. So we're already over pumping the wells. Again, separate from the water table. Like we're not taking any water from the water table. We're taking from a deeper aquifer system. If you think of it as a layer cake, as the water table, which is what your first question was, there's no wells that are taking water from the water table. We're taking it from deeper. The water table, though, we do look at, and we are concerned about with just the construction, the change, plus that water table is feeding the wetland, and we're looking at that as well.
So on that point, the wells that are gonna be drilled for these homes, are they gonna go deep and go all that, or are they gonna go to the water table?
No, they're deep. The water table is the first thing you hit.
Yeah.
We're
Is
deep.
Is that what the wells are gonna?
All the
do?
wells are deep. They're all down into the limestone. There's not enough water in the water table to supply these homes. Like that's not even it. Well, two reasons. One is there's not enough generally. It's not, if it was a good sand and gravel at surface, maybe there would be, but it doesn't have the geology. So we wouldn't even look at it from a quantity point of view. Two is there's no security in the water table. So it's the same if you have a shallow dug well, you have more potential contamination for bacteria and other contaminants getting into it because there's no filtration, there's nothing else really, right? So generally our mandate when we're looking at a large, like a development, even if this was a single site severance, generally municipalities want to see drilled wells, which means you have to have at least 6 meters of watertight casing. You're generally not connected to the water table. Although if the water table is deeper and it's good aquifer, they might be, but they still need to be at least 6 meters deep. So 20 feet. And then you screen below that. In this case, we're talking at least 100, if not more like 150 or more feet that we're down into. Sorry, I do stuff in meters because that's how we have to do stuff. But I mean, let's see here. The deepest well we have is 73 meters. So we're 170 feet.
All the people who live in that immediate area. I moved into my home in 2019. And I know that summer, there was water trucks going to the west end of Elwood Crescent, filling up wells because they were running out of water. I also know across the road from myself, there's a pond. And in the summertime, that pond is, or not summertime, but in the spring of the year, it's full. And when that pond dries up, there's people on Moonlight Road, that's their cue that we have to watch the amount of water that we consume. And I think our concern here is, as it's been pointed out by several people, is where is this, if these wells are drilled and we run out of water, what's our recourse? And are you folks on the hook a little bit too, or we're on our own?
Well, with respect to the first part, again, seasonally, yes. And last summer was a bad drought period. We had almost 2 months of no rain. We had a very bad drought last year, right? Yeah. In context. Based on that, we had to drill one new well at the site just because of the size of it. And the clients were concerned because we didn't do the original well testing. All right. That was a different firm a few years ago that did that. And they said, well, it's a really dry well. Are we concerned about our own water supply wells too, just to make sure that we're going to put this ahead? Like they're trying to be good stewards and good neighbors and whatnot too. So that's why we tested 2 other wells. No one required us to do it. No peer review. No one asked us to verify those previous studies. We went out because they were worried about, like, does the previous report hold up, right? Under these drought conditions. And that's why we're out it was the first week in November. It was still very dry. Water levels in those wells were, probably about 4 or 5 feet lower than what they were from the original study. We did see less flow rate in one of the wells. That was about 2 gallons a minute. Again, if for peak usage, it might need a storage system at peak usage, but it was previously tested in the spring and it had tons of water in it, right? But we did it's still, as long as you have more than a gallon a minute with a water storage system, you're fine. So that one, the peer review was like, okay, that's fine. They flagged it that it might need a storage system for that one well. But the other one, which was the weakest well that was tested originally, had tons of water in it still. And then the new well, which went even deeper and connected to multiple fractures, that had a huge amount of water. And that was in November during these drought conditions. I understand some people's wells were having a lot of problems last year. I understand that. I'm saying the wells on the site, as long as you connect deeper, are not seeing that. We had one that was lower yielding, and we had to address that with the peer review. But the other 2 were very strong.
So does that mean that all 58 wells that you are going to be drilled down to 170 feet at least?
Can I?
Yeah.
Sorry, I
just make
sure
your comments go through the chair, please.
Come back to here, just so it's just not open forum. Okay, so back to, the water supply side, right? Like we're connected to much deeper aquifers. We're not connected to the water table, which does seasonally go dry. And that's a completely different concern, especially if you have a shallow well. That's also the reason not to have a shallow dug well, is that I have neighbors too on shallow dug wells, and during dry periods, they bring in water trucks. These are deeper wells. We tested during a drought period, and we still said that there's enough water in it from our testing. So that's the thing with hydrogeology. There's a lot of variability. Things change over distance. Things change with depth. This is why we go out and test to verify stuff. We're not just going with book values.
And you have another comment here first?
Is that, and you don't have to agree with me. I'm just saying, do you understand, or is there something else I can explain?
Okay, I think you have a comment.
My name is George
Okay.
Lewis, and I live on Bass Lake, and we use occasionally 49. Last year, we lived with our suitcase packed because across 49 was a out of control forest fire, 3 of them. And it was a heavy drought period. We live in the land between, which is a unique aquifer. But the drought isn't just affecting wells and septics. I mean, right now, 3 weeks ago, we had water in our basement right up to the 3rd tier. Lots of water. But there's periods of time when the aquifer, because of climate change and El Nino effect, and it's been 2 years now, we've had serious drought. Our forests are burning, and I'm scared to death about what's going to happen here. And, using what precious water we have, in the way that we're using it, I think we have to really be very careful when we make these kind of decisions. I don't want to have to pack my bags again this summer. I'm afraid we might have to. That's what we're living with. We're living with the lack of water. And it's the aquifer, you can drill it as deep as you want, but this whole area is an aquifer. It's the land between. It's a very precious area between the Great Lakes and the Canadian Shield. Very unique. That's why we live here. That's the kind of place we decided to move here. I've been here over 40 years. And I don't want to see that change. We've got to do some, not only adaptation, and that's what we're talking about here, is adaptation of our living conditions. But we also have to begin to mitigate to try and help to reverse a bit the climate change that's causing all this.
Thank you, George. Thank you very much for your comment. And then we have one more here.
I have a short question. I'd like a short answer.
Okay, we'll do our
So
best.
If I'm down 170 feet up the hill, and I'm down 170 feet down the hill, and water flows downhill, I'm just not getting how that doesn't affect the water if you say it's coming downhill. Doesn't the shale and the limestone and everything else all follow the topography? I'm sorry, I'm asking a question, a big, long question. I just want a short answer. Down 175, down 175 at the other end, and I'm sparsely got enough water now. And I promise it won't affect you down here. That's what I'm getting. So I don't understand that. Can you explain that shortly for me?
2 points. One is, I don't know what your elevation start is to say what you're down compared to, like, elevations are different on the site. So when I'm talking about depth, it's from wherever that point is. I don't know where you're down from, so it's hard to put in context. Limestone, no, I understood down that part, but I don't know where your starting elevation is in comparison to the other, because the ground's not flat, right? So I get, that's what we're trying to connect to on the aquifers. The limestone itself, though, is very flat. It's not going downhill. Like the limestone is like dipping slightly to the south geologically, but generally very flat, regardless of what's happening at surface. It's generally fairly flat across for formations.
So I'm down 170 feet in my limestone at my place. You're down 170 feet in the limestone at your place up the hill, and you're saying to me a limestone's like this. I'm confused.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think
Again, I don't.
Layers of sedimentary rock
the
are very
limestone's
flat.
flat. There's different other things going on.
Okay.
And again, there's multiple fractures, there's multiple aquifer systems and whatnot too. And then those fractures change over distance, which is why we have to spread out wells across the site to say what's going on across the site.
So
I can't necessarily comment what's happening off-site because we haven't tested
more water
it.
with your drilling and putting 58 houses up there. Is all I'm saying. I'm not going to get more water.
No.
So I've hardly got enough as it is, and maybe it won't affect me down the hill. That's what I'm hearing. So am I misunderstanding that, or?
I think they've done a lot of testing that says that it will not.
Yeah, sir, I've never once said maybe it won't. It's,
No,
we
no,
definitively
that's
said
what I
it's
heard.
not going to.
That's what I heard.
Okay, one more
Sorry, and back to the one comment that was thrown out there too. Our recommended target depth is the deeper fracture systems, because we did have that one low yielding well during our November testing. So we want the wells into like multiple fractures down. So that was worked out with peer review as well. So in the subdivision agreement, they'll have a target depth for what these wells will go into. They can't just install them wherever they want or the water table or whatnot. We have a target zone that we tested and we proved that's the target zone that they have to install the wells into.
Okay, we have one more question from the back there, I think.
So with all due respect, I understand what you're saying, and I believe that everybody in this room understands, because you're a little bit repetitive in the way that you're saying it to us. The thing that I am getting from you is that the numbers and the information that you're providing us are about your site, not the surrounding areas. Everyone, I think, in this room has the same concern about how this is going to affect our water. Is there an opportunity for you to be doing any kind of testing or conversations or with us in the surrounding area to confirm that you truly are not going to be affecting our water? Because it sounds like everything that you're telling us is about your site. You've not done any testing with my well, with my neighborhood. And I'm down on Elwood, down at the bottom of the hill. I have 170 plus foot drilled well. So like all of the things that you're saying to me, I absolutely understand. Is there going to be something that is going to be put in place that's going to give us some kind of information? You've told us how will you deal with it after the fact when it's affected our water. We'd like to know more information in advance.
Should be a letter of agreement, but the city should, he has to put up the money to protect our wells. A letter of credit from the banks. That's guarantees from the city that we are not affected. That's what, they have to protect us.
Sorry,
Yep, go ahead.
response through you, council. Again, whatever happens in the agreement with any of that stuff, that would be between the developer and municipality through the course of getting the subdivision agreement. We have not done any direct testing offsite. That wasn't part of our scope. That's typically not done. We do a lot of background research on those wells. Most of those wells have everyone, whenever you drill a well, you have a water well record. It goes to Ministry of Environment. We pull that data. We look at all that. Most of the wells in the area, and I think it was like 89%, were above the minimum rate well yield that we expected. So it looks like most of the wells, at least, again, above the 89% of the ones within 500 meters of the site.
For the city of Peterborough.
Sorry, can I finish, sir, please? Yeah. 89% of them within 500 meters were above the minimum testing rate. So that says that most of the people in the area have enough water, so we didn't see any concerns. It also means 11% of them were low yielding, which could be some of the ones where you do hear some issues and whatnot, right? Mm-hmm. So we do our background research on the geology and aquifer systems offsite, but we can't go out and test every single part, right? Again, it comes down to cost one. We focus our testing on the site. We verify that there's enough yield for what they're talking about development. We've proven that, and we've proven that to peer review consultants that are experts in this field that are retained by the municipality.
Sorry, so that you're proving that there's enough for the 58 in homes and all of us existing.
For enough on site without interfering with otherwise the wells on site or the interfering with the wells off site, yes.
Yeah, you have.
So where's the guarantee in that?
Again, I'm a consultant that's hired to do a study to prove something. If there's a guarantee or a subdivision agreement or whatever, that is not part of my mandate, and I can't
So
promise anything on that side.
Okay, I think we have one more question over here. Go ahead. Please state your name.
Kim Acton. Personally, I was okay when I heard 20 some odd houses coming in. I thought I wasn't overly excited about it, but I thought I can live with that. But when I heard 58 houses, and you look at, that's a subdivision. What we have in the neighborhood that we live in is very unique. Nice size lots, lots of space between, and I think that is going to decrease the value of our homes incredibly. That is a subdivision. We didn't move into Elwood to be in we are in a subdivision, but we don't see our neighbors. There's room, not scrunched in like that.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Go ahead. Yep.
Just one clarification. So just to remember, and I know the visual of this, some of those lots are 1.25 hectares inside. So it's like 2.5 acre lots. So they're not, when you're driving down the street, you're not looking at what you would typically think of as a subdivision, if that helps you at all.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Anyone else have any comments? Okay, thank you very much for all the conversation. Appreciate that. We can move on now to item 5 of our agenda, which is, no, I need to have a motion to suspend or go back into our regular meeting. Councillor Cadigan for a mover, Deputy Mayor Armstrong for a seconder. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. And now we can move on to item 5.1 of our agenda. Adele Arbor, our planner, would you like to speak to this item? We might want to wait for some people to exit. Okay, have your conversations in the hallway if you please. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Adele Arbor, our planner, would you like to speak to item 5.1?
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, before I go to the recommendation, based on the conversation that was held today between the public and consultants, I just wanted council to be aware that the plan of subdivision did not require a public meeting. From the province has taken that requirement away. So the approval authority for the plan of subdivision is the county. There'll be a further report that comes from municipal staff to identify certain draft plan conditions that we would request the county to include for any plan of subdivision that goes forward. So I just wanted to make sure that council was aware that there is no public meeting for the subdivision plan itself. However, we are dealing with the official plan amendment, which deals with the settlement area expansion and also the zoning bylaw. So what staff are recommending is that council receive the information provided in the statutory public meeting regarding zoning bylaw amendment file number 25-14 and official plan amendment file number 62, and further that council support zoning bylaw amendment file number 25-14 and official plan amendment file number 62, and further that council directs staff to prepare a zoning bylaw amendment and an official plan amendment to be brought forward for adoption at a future council meeting.
Okay, thank you very much, Adele Arbor. Is anyone prepared to make that motion? Seeing no hands. Is anyone prepared to make a motion? Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Let me attempt to wade in here. First, I have laryngitis, so excuse the voice. First of all, patience to everybody who listened through all the technical details. That was a lot. Most of it went way over my head. If I kind of summarize what I heard a number of comments made that really were challenging the provincial requirements for studies. The studies were done based on the provincial direction. And so not our place. I don't have the expertise to challenge those. So I think we have to accept those as they are and ensure that the studies and the peer reviews actually adhere to those. So that's kind of number one. Number two, the one thing that I did not hear addressed was around the transportation study and whether or not it included all parts of Moonline Road. I just pulled up the study, the transportation study from somebody, Next Trans. And I guess I would just ask the question of our planning people, did that study encompass all of Moonline Road? Because that was certainly the question that was asked. It clearly adhered to the provincial requirements for a transportation study. So that part was done, it was peer reviewed. But did it, incorporate the entire area?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm not 100% sure, but I know that they are professionals, technical staff that would assess the transportation. So they would look at transportation from all areas leading to the plan of subdivision. And perhaps the planning consultant could provide some additional information.
Okay, I think we've bounced off that a couple times, but go ahead if you wouldn't mind. Debbie.
Through you. I would need to review the study exactly to look at the study area that they captured, but this is part of my previous career being a transportation planner. So these studies do take into consideration where you're coming from and where you're going to, and they measure those peak and hours. So without having the benefit of looking at the exact words in that study, I would say yes with confidence.
Okay. And if I just add to that, it looks like they address both the southbound approach and the northbound approach in their study. So it looks to me like they address that. So again, that was the one outstanding question that I had for today's discussion. Thank you. That was all I had.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments from council? I think I can add to that a little bit too. I mean, you can't get on Moonline Road North without driving on Moonline. So you've captured every vehicle other than the 6 and myself that come across Ranch Road and down. But then if they come out, you still capture that vehicle count. So you miss 1 or 2 that go to their home from Ranch Road and down, and that seldom happens unless it's me.
Sorry, I did have one other comment if I can get it
Sure,
out.
go ahead.
I think the intent of all of these provincial requirements in the studies is to be predictive. So none of that is guaranteed. The only assurance we would have as citizens is that those requirements have been tested over time to ensure that the predictions actually match with the results. So again, there's no guarantee. To your point, I understand you're worried about your well appropriately. I think I came away pretty assured that the development will not have any impact on your well, but your well still may go dry because of weather conditions and other conditions. So that was the only other comment I had is at best they're predictive, but they're predictive based on 30 years of experience.
Sorry, there's no comments now. You've had your chances. Any other comments or questions? Council Cadry, go ahead.
I'm prepared to make a motion.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that council receive the information, that council support the zoning bylaw amendment, and council direct staff to prepare a zoning bylaw amendment and an official plan amendment to be brought forward at a future meeting.
Okay, thank you for the motion. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Franzen for a seconder. Any further conversation from council? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. I just want to thank all the professionals in the room that have answered many, many questions, and our staff too. We've had a lot of back and forth, and there's been a lot of things included in this report, and we do appreciate your professionalism. And I look forward to it moving forward, but let's hope we can protect all the wells that exist. Thank you very much. I can move on to item 6 of our agenda, which is adjournment. Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn? Councillor Franzen for a mover, Councillor Cadigan for a seconder. I will call for the vote. All in favor? That motion has carried. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone, both virtually and physically, for attending. Appreciate it.